Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Jeannie Zames, and I am Director of Growth Marketing at Alchemer, and I will be hosting our webinar. Alchemer is one of the world's leading customer experience and voice of the customer platform providers. We are helping organizations around the world transform into customer-centric organizations. I'm excited to be joined by our two panelists, Ryan Tamangia, and David Roberts. David is CEO at Alchemer, and Ryan is Vice President of Customer Success. These two colleagues bring a wide depth of knowledge and experience in both strategic and tactical aspects of customer experience and voice of the customer. We will have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. If you do have questions, please submit them via the portal at any time during the webinar. This should be a very interesting discussion. I don't think anyone would be surprised to know the working environment has changed in ways I don't think any of us thought were possible since that second week in March. Virtual has become the standard for all interactions, personal and professional, business to business, and business to consumer. As we look to 2021, I think we all know that even as we start to return to normal, it'll be a very different environment. As we all started planning for 2021 and working with customers, analysts, and industry experts, Ryan and David have identified several trends and predictions that we want to share with you today. So let's get started. All right, our first prediction. We believe the customer experience will be powered by leaders on the front line. David is the leader of a customer service and your customer experience organization. I'm going to turn that to you.
Thanks, Jeannie. And let me just start by echoing what Jeannie said during the introduction. It's great to have everyone here with us today. I'll say I'm coming to you live from my attic in Denver, Colorado. I know many of us have been working from home for many, many, many months. It's an environment where we're more distanced from our customers and from our employees. And while things like Zoom or video chat or Slack or Microsoft Teams make our interactions possible, it certainly creates an environment where it's difficult to stay connected to one another. And at this time, getting really close to your customer is critically important. And we'll talk about that same sort of topic as we talk about employees as well. So let me dive into the first prediction, that the customer experience will be powered by leaders on the front line. We've seen a lot of progress in wider and wider parts of organizations really getting engaged in helping shape that customer experience. For a while at the beginning, I think people thought we needed to create one centralized group that led customer experience, that everything funneled in and out of that group, that projects were big and monolithic. And I think the leaders out there are starting to see that they can get this balance right between democratizing people's leadership and customer experience, but also still having that central design and central governance in place. So we believe that the best customer experience engagement is going to be driven by those leaders on the front line, whether you're in product and you're trying to figure out how to shape and direct your offering to your customer, or whether you're in customer success like Ryan and you're trying to figure out how you stay connected and really listen to what your customer's telling you about their experience with you, or whether you're in marketing or you're trying to figure out how to better engage current customers and prospects, or whether you're in things like shipping or inventory management or health, safety, and environment. All of these different parts of the business can benefit from taking feedback directly from the customer and wiring it in to how they run their businesses. So I'll say it again, we think that yes, you need an organization with centrally to understand the design and to empower people all over the enterprise, but you also need people out at the front lines engaging with customers, really creating the feedback systems that mean their customers worried about the things that they're worried about in that instance are the ones that are the ones driving the real progress across CX and voice of the customer. Ryan, I know you and I have debated this a lot and talked about it. What would you add to that prediction?
Yeah, I mean, I think, what we spend a lot of time talking with our customers about is the concept of closing the loop. Like one of your customers provides feedback, or they're asking for help, or they're interested in a new product or service. And, that concept of empowering at the front lines is so important, because it allows you to close the loop with your customers on that individual piece of feedback in real time. So, the other thing we talk with our customers a lot is like survey fatigue and feedback fatigue, and people don't feel like they've been heard, or they don't feel like that people listen, or that actions being taken on the feedback they're providing, which actually disenfranchises them from participating in voice of the customer programs and providing that valuable customer feedback. And so by allowing your frontline team members they're actively participating in those customer interactions at each point in that customer journey, you allow your customers to feel valued, feel heard. You're improving their experience at that specific moment in time. And then you can go focus on what are the broad stroke projects that you want to go take on that'll improve things, on a quarterly or annual basis. But you'd never miss a chance to really improve that customer's experience at that point in time. And I think that trend of speed and agility is a common theme you'll hear throughout our predictions. But it's one that's going to continue to drive voice of the customer and customer experience in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I guess I'll add one other thought, and that is, so I'm a Gen Xer. Ryan's a millennial. I think more and more of the leadership of businesses and organizations are going to be led by millennials. And as a generation, what they really care about is being able to see the direct impact of what they do. They want to have impact. And if you put tools like Alchemer in the hands of people who are leading, they're the ones who can actually engage with that customer and feel like they're having the impact. My generation's a little more hierarchical, but in the way we were brought up, things roll up and roll down. I'm not sure that's the way that business and technology really work today. We really need to get to a place where things are much more democratized, and those frontline leaders are the ones solving the problems for their customers.
Great discussion. All right, let's move to our next trend. We believe that digital transformation efforts will accelerate dramatically. In many instances, customers can no longer engage with a company at all, face-to-face. All right, this one I'm going to start with you, Ryan, as head of customer success.
Yeah, I think this one's pretty apparent these days, kind of as we enter or in the midst of our second wave of the pandemic here in the U.S. But the ability to reach your customers face-to-face is limited right now. And it's actually, I believe, it's behavior changing. People who used to go to shopping malls or go to box retailers, or even in a B2B space where you would fly for a sales meeting, or you would travel and see a product display, or go to a conference and hear what people say, those aren't options anymore, or at least they won't be for a little while longer. And I think the things that people have learned over the last year are changing the way that people engage with businesses or engage with customers. And I think about just even as simple as your website. I think people have kind of fallen back a little bit on websites, kind of the place you land just to find the information to make the next step. And as digital connections become more and more important, re-looking at your website and understanding how that's engaging your audience is so important, because it's actually your storefront now, in the same way that you would imagine a department store has got their window fronts in the front, and that's what's bringing you into those stores. And so, I just think that because of the way that the universe is moving to these digital channels and really actually making it linear, so like you're feeling like your customer is speaking directly to you, that's going to continue to accelerate. And finding new ways to be engaging, finding new ways to reach your customers, finding new ways to promote and display products and services is just it's going to be the future. What do you think?
Yeah. One of the last business trips I took is out to go see a couple great customers in Boston. And as part of that, we sat and had coffee with one customer. We went out for a drink after work with another customer. That creates intimacy. It builds relationship. It allows us to get to know each other more. While we've all been really effective in this kind of transactional world, remote, we've been effective. I don't know that we've created intimacy and we've built trust at the same level. And so the companies that are thriving right now, and you can see them based on their business results, are the ones who've really adopted the digital transformation, that they can do business really well digitally. That you can order from Target and pull up in the parking lot and someone sticks it in your trunk and you drive away, right? Like Target's done an amazing job with digital transformation, but it does mean that experience feels different. I don't have the same sort of engagement with Target that I did 9 months ago. And how can any business that's trying to create intimacy, trust, relationship, do it digitally? We think there's a way, and we'll talk more about that, but we think it's by taking people's feedback and not aggregating it into giant dashboards, not trying to roll it up and plot trends, not looking at it quarterly to try to figure out if there's things you need to do, but actually to wire it into your business so that every part of the business is reacting to that customer feedback. It allows you to be incredibly nimble. It allows you to respond in a way that feels intimate, even though it's still in a digital world.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing I would add there too is like people want to feel like they're known, right? Like that's why people have their favorite local restaurants and they have their favorite local stores. You walk in and people know who you are. They know you're more than just a receipt and you're more than just a transaction. And the more feedback you can capture at an individual level, and you're using those in your interactions to understand what people are looking for or what challenges they're facing, or what we can do to better that experience at that individual level. And again, back to the first trend of empowering your front lines, it's how you can help build those relationships in a world that's behind a computer screen or sitting in the front of your car when someone's loading the groceries in the back. I mean, you have to take every opportunity you have to engage your customers in a personal way to make them feel connected to your business.
Something I've heard you talk about, Ryan, is the idea of hyper-personalization. Can you talk about that just a little bit and how that ties in?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's obviously the number one example that always comes to my mind, because we use them a lot, is obviously Amazon. Amazon does a great job of knowing what you buy, how you buy, your buying patterns, product suggestions, and it feels like it's a very personalized experience for you based on all of the technology that's driving those behaviors. And I think people are becoming more and more used to that experience, where if they're engaging with an online retailer or they're engaging with different technologies like, Zoom or Alchemer, people expect that it's tailored to you, because it seems like it's, again, back in that like kind of siloed view, like I'm engaging with Amazon or I'm engaging with Target and Target's engaging directly to me. It's not like I'm standing in a store with 500 other people now where I'm trying to get attention. So, I think this concept of hyper-personalization is going to become more and more important as people as you deliver services and products in a way that's directly engaging individual customers.
Especially in a digital world.
Yeah.
Very interesting. All right, let's go to our next prediction. We predict that the sophistication of CX, or customer experience, will skyrocket. I'm going to send this one to you to start with, Ryan.
Yeah, I think when I think of sophistication, I think of simplicity. There's a lot of sophistication that drives processes or engagements that seem very simple. I remember back when I used to travel quite a bit for work, and the first time I called my airline and it recognized my phone number, my status, my upcoming trip, and the agent who I was going to speak to already predicted what I was going to talk about. And again, I don't have to wait on hold. I don't have to type a bunch of numbers in. It happens. And that level of engagement of your customers in terms of that experience seems very simple, because the time it takes in that duration is instantaneous. But the sophistication of the technology that's working in the background to understand who you are, why you're calling, where you sit within their customer segmentation, directing it to somebody specific who can answer your questions. I mean, that's not easy stuff. But again, it requires sophistication of technology. So when we talk about wiring and feedback, providing customer level specific feedback in your CRM at the customer level, so that when your customer service rep or your support rep is engaging with your customer, we already know everything about you. and we make it seem like it's so personal to you, and make it easy for you to get the information you're looking for without having to fill all that stuff in. Like our platform does a great job of making that automation seamless and in real time, and that level of sophistication to provide that level of kind of a high touch feel is really, really cool, and it's something that it's going to become more and more apparent every day.
Yeah, and I think Ryan's exactly right. Often there's an old Mark Twain quote that says, "I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time." Right? Making things simple requires more time. It requires more sophistication, and we think, for example, by collecting feedback in a sophisticated way, understanding what it is, using analytics and workflow, putting it in the hands of the person who does that job every day and the system they use every day, makes it so it seems simple, right? Like we obviously have lots of customers. We work to support and renew those customers every year. We know Ryan runs our NPS program, Net Promoter Score program, and we know that if you're a strong promoter, you're likely to renew. If you're a strong detractor, you actually are also likely to renew. If you're a passive, which is a 5 or a 6 or a 7, those are the customers that don't renew as well. And so it's because they're not engaged. They're not really involved in what we provide our customers. And we have our entire CSM team, customer success managers, engage customers differently based on how engaged they are with us, and where we need to take proactive steps in supporting really engaged customers versus where we need to take proactive steps in supporting maybe more passive customers. And it's all based on a very simple concept, which is Net Promoter Score. That's only one example. There's lots of them where you can make feedback be a very sophisticated and then thus simple way of engaging with your customer.
And I think we'll talk a little bit about employee experience, but like for us, our customer support team, we call them support heroes. They really love coming to work every day because of the engagement that they have with our customers, and our CSMs love engaging with our customers, and that's what drives their job satisfaction and their ability to feel empowered and to deliver the service that we expect to deliver to our customers and our customers expect from us. And what I don't want them doing all day is sorting through data or sorting through customer profiles or trying to find information that's going to help them in those conversations. Like putting that data right in front of them in the systems that they use every day at the point in time of engagement makes it easy for them to really help or serve our customers in real time. And again, that's what we talk to our customers about every day, about engaging and closing the loop with customers, is that you don't put the burden of understanding what's going on in the past through other systems at their, in front of them. Make it so simple and easy for them to just go, "Oh, I know why you're calling. Last time this was it." Or, "Hey, you gave us an NPS feedback last week that said this. Let me help you engage in that problem and let me help sort that out for you." It's again, that simplicity and sophistication is just going to become more and more paramount.
Very interesting. All right, our next prediction, and this one is kind of is tied to the previous one, is even though we predict sophistication level will skyrocket, we also predict that some companies will over-rotate towards automation. I'm going to give this one to you to start with, Ryan, as well.
Sure. So, in prior experience within my career, I spent a lot of time working with organizations leveraging tools like robotic process automation and, and again, helping automate things should make it easier for your employees to do things or free up time that you would rather have them spent directly engaging with your customers. And so if you're using automation to kind of solve the customer problem at the customer engagement level, there's a chance that you're going to miss the mark because people are looking for that personal connection. And like David mentioned earlier, like in a digital environment, it's very challenging to build that trust or that intimacy and that relationship. And over-rotating on that automation will actually make it harder for you to do that. And so, automation is a tool that should empower your customer-facing employees to spend more time or spend more valuable time of their energy with your customers and not vice versa. So,
yeah, And I'll say some of us have used chat, and we'll go out and chat with companies that we work with. The first thing I ask is if the chat window is a bot, and if it is, and I know my question's transactional, like what's the status of something, that's perfect for that kind of interaction. But if I have, and I'm not usually reaching out to companies unless things are a little more involved, so I quickly try to move beyond the bot to get to a human who can engage in what I'm dealing with. I think automation is critical. I think it's human beings by definition try to categorize so they can understand, right? We do it from a young age. I've got 11 and 9-year-old boys who put Legos into colors or into shapes. Like, we all categorize, and we categorize to help our understanding. Human brains being able to engage in a huge amount of data is nearly impossible. So you guys have probably gone out and scored feedback you've gotten, and you say, oh, this is a product issue, this is a pricing issue, this is a billing issue. And the fidelity of what that customer's told you gets lost when you score like that. You lose the fidelity of what the customer, their true intention is. If you've done scoring, you've gone out and you're like, I don't know, is that a product one or a price one? I'll stick it in price. So we categorize. What our technology and a lot of technology allows us to do now is we don't need to do that. We can route information based on the very specifics of the feedback, and we can workflow it to the people who are best placed to address the issue. But at the end, it needs to end up with a person in many cases, and that person is the one who then comes back to the customer, closes the loop, establishes intimacy and relationship, builds brand trust. So we think this over rotation is, I'm going to use AI, which is effectively pattern recognition, and pattern recognition is effectively categorization. And yes, computers have gotten very sophisticated in terms of what they can do there, but the over rotation is, I'm going to try to push the customer into a category or push them into a certain way of us handling something, and not allowing that human at the right point in time, in the right place in the organization, to really engage with the customer, to help them with whatever it is they need from you. So that's what we believe, is that people will over-rotate on automation.
Something I've heard both of you guys talk about is how important it is asking for feedback at multiple points in a customer relationship. Is that something, I know a lot of times I feel like, oh, I just placed a new order, they're going to ask me for feedback. How do you adjust that so that that reaches that personal level?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think it's about a systems way of thinking, right? So if you have a life cycle, like all of us do in terms of how we engage with our customer, that you're engaging them specifically in what they care about at that point in their relationship with you, right? During sales, it looks different than during onboarding, which looks different than when you're achieving the outcomes you set out to achieve in buying the product or service, which is different from when you're up for renewal, or different from when you need to expand. Like, they're all different life cycles, and how you engage and what you ask should really be tailored to what that what the customer's most likely to care about during those interactions.
And I think, like, long-standing customer relationships are complicated. Like, from the day you decide you're going to buy something from someone to the day you decide you're not going to buy something anymore from from that individual, like, there's multiple years, multiple interactions. You're dealing with sales, you're different departments, you're probably moving across products. Your buying behaviors change. I have a 17-month-old, so, like, in the last 17 months, my life has dramatically changed in terms of what I'm buying from a consumer perspective. And again, the stores remain the same, but keeping track of where you stand with your customers at every point in their customer journey is where that sophistication comes into play. And so you never forget where your customer came from, but you're in the now with them, and you're also thinking about where they're going to go in the future, and keeping track of that in terms of technology and that systems-driven mindset is so important, because it's way too complicated for any one person to ever understand every single customer in every single situation and through their entire journey. And so letting technology drive how that gets played out in your organization through your customer journey it's so important these days.
Very interesting. That's a great discussion. All right, let's go to our last prediction. And this one's a little different. So this brings in the employee side. And our trend and prediction that we see is that employee experience will be just as critical as customer experience in meeting those customer needs and meeting those expectations. David is the leader of our organization. I'm going to turn this over to you first.
Thanks, Jeannie. I'll say when I took on my first CEO role, somebody sat down with me and said, "All right, David, your job's simple. It's about vision, strategy, and culture." And culture is the thing I think about as much as anything in how we shape Alchemer. We are spread out around the country in supporting our customers and supporting the business. And our headquarters is in Louisville, Colorado, which is between Denver and Boulder. And a lot of our employees from here, but we're all working remotely right now. And like I said earlier, it's easy to be isolated, transactional. People will say the two biggest reasons people stay with a company is one, their relationship with their supervisor, and two, whether they have friends at work. I don't know how you make sure that, I don't know how you build friendships. I don't know how you build relationships with your supervisor that are as connected and as deep when you're always virtual, right? So it's a tricky time. And we believe, just like we talk about with customers, that in this remote world where people are distributed, that there's ways to engage employees and to really listen to them and to be able to act on what they're telling you. Whether it's, for example, you can ask employees what they think of their benefits. I'm not that interested in whether our PPO plan or our HSA plan is the one that really people are connected to. I'm more listening, and our HR leaders more listening for instances where people have a concern that they voice through that engagement, and they tell us they need education on what our 401k program is and what our match is and how they plan for retirement. When you engage potential employees, it's really easy to read through resumes. Any of us who've done hiring lately, and you post a position and you read through resumes and you try to figure out the daunting task of understanding whether an employee is going to be a great employee or not by reading resumes and screening. There's no reason why you can't engage them through some sort of feedback system where you're capturing their ideas and their thoughts about how they might fit into a role, or why they have passion about joining Alchemer, or why they left their last role, or what's most important to them in an employer, and using those to screen, which are much more valuable than trying to read through a resume and pick the bones out of it. So there's great examples of where our customers are using our technology to engage prospective employees, departed employees, and understanding how to build that culture that every CEO has at one of the core tenets of their job.
Yeah, when I think of this, I think of passion, right? Like, I think engaged employees are passionate about your company, they're passionate about your products, they're passionate about your customer base, they're passionate about each other. You know, they're here to, like, that passion comes through in conversations. And you know, having a really good pulse on where employee engagement sits across the company, across departments, is so important, because your customers will feel it. Like, I just had an experience where I bought a new pair of skis this year, and the gentleman I spoke to was just fired up about his ski brand, about, you know, why this is the best ski this year, why he skis it, why he tells all of his friends to ski on it. I mean, like, I wanted to buy 3 pairs by the end of it, because he was, like, so convincing and passionate about what they were doing. And I kind of look back, and I took that interaction back to our support team, for example. And, you know, like, I love the fact that we don't really take note of how long people spend on the phone with our customers, right? We really focus on solving our customers' problem, and we empower our team members to go do that. And our team loves that, and they thrive on that, and they love helping our customers achieve their goals and their missions with our platform. And I think if you've got a fantastically engaged organization, that passion comes through. And it's hard right now, right? It's hard to feel engaged and connected and everything. And I think the more feedback you get from your employee base on what's going to help them feel empowered during this time, and the more you deploy those suggestions and those tools to your employees to keep them and keep that passion up and to keep that engagement level up, your customers will feel it. And that will help build that trust and that relationship with your customer base that continues to keep them coming back for more.
Yeah, so just like prediction number 2, digital transformation means you're getting more distance from your customer. And that's what's happening during the time of COVID and will probably persist as we return to normal. Let's all cross our fingers as the vaccine rolls out. But the same is true of employees. We live here in Colorado, and lots of people are moving here from all over the country to buy homes or condos in the mountains because they figured out they can work from anywhere, and they kind of want to be where it's beautiful. That's nice in some ways for us in Colorado, but we're seeing that everywhere in the country where people are choosing where they want to be and figuring out they can work from anywhere. How do we create that emotional connection and creativity that still needs to exist? And in what way can technology help give you signals around where you want to focus with your with your employees, or with a specific employee who's got a specific concern or challenge? So we think that's going to be a big part of 2021 as well, Jeannie.
Cool. I'm going to ask a specific question for Ryan. I'm fairly new to the company, and a couple of my very first meetings were with members of Ryan's team, and they were great meetings because it was like, you're right, they're so passionate about what they do and about helping those customers, and they had so many examples to tell. Since we're all remote, and as the leader of that team, Ryan, how do you kind of make sure you keep your pulse of that team, back and forth, and maybe somebody's having kind of a crappy day and we take them off the phone that day? How do you manage that?
Well, I mean, I think you got to build it into your kind of weekly cadence, right? Like, you can't just jump into business all the time. You have to check in, you have to talk about what was going on over the weekend, talk about, the fun things that everyone's kids are doing, talk about interesting things that, are going on in the world, and get people's perspectives. And I think building it into your normal cadence is super important. But probably the more challenging and harder way to do that is, how do you keep a pulse on people who kind of pull back a little bit? And I think, pulse surveys, get feedback on a regular basis from your employees, allow you to kind of understand where things are shifting in individuals' perception and of kind of engagement or of your organization. And you don't need to be invasive or anything, but it takes time and it takes effort to build those individual relationships and reach out when you know that something's going on, and see what you can do to solve the problem and help them become more engaged, or understand the situation that's driving those kind of disengaged feelings. And it's work. And again, I think back to the automation and the workflow and kind of how this all works, it's like you set these systems up that are constantly capturing this feedback, and it's sorting itself into points in time. You can basically intersect those moments before they become a problem, and it just takes focus, and it's a focus that I think everyone's learned over the last 9 months to start to do. But again, whether you go back to the office after the pandemic kind of slows down a little bit or you don't, it's behaviors that you're going to have to deploy and employ forever. I mean, people have gotten used to this universe, and you just really have to focus. And especially as leaders of organizations, I personally have a passion for our people, and I think that passion comes through to our team, and my leaders on my team have that passion for our people. And if you carry that passion through your organization, it will reflect to your customers as well.
Very interesting. All right. Well, thank you to both of you. It looks like we do have some questions coming in, and if you have any questions, please submit those via the Bright Talk panel. So why don't we start out with a couple of them? The first one, how do you set up standards and metrics for a company-wide customer experience initiative when you move to a more centralized initiative? What does that look like, and how do you determine that? And I'll let either one of you take that one.
Yeah, I'm happy to start with that. I think there are some company-wide or organization-wide metrics that can give you a sense of where a customer, or as we talked about, an employee may stand. Things like NPS give you a sense of that. It's such a simple tool, but it's actually very powerful if you're using it to run your business, or any other customer satisfaction kind of program can give you that broad view. We look at how engaged customers are, and we look at it based on their usage of the product, the frequency, the depth, so we can look at that as well. But I think what's critically important is that companies are getting feedback about whatever it is that customer cares about, the specifics of what they're concerned about. So if there's a better way for us to onboard customers, we need to know about it, and we need to get it to Roman, who's responsible for doing that, and have him change the way he runs things. If customers tell us they have issues with any given part of our product, they may put it in an NPS comment box. They didn't actually open a support ticket, but they put it in a comment box. We can be proactive and reach out to them and address it. We may want to look at like retention rates within an account management function. Again, we use feedback to understand where we stand with those customers and how they correlate to customer retention. We see improving NPS drive improving renewal rates. It's not rocket science, but if you're operationalizing feedback, you can actually drive and measure what it's doing for unique cohorts of customers. So it's the specific metrics that are part of whatever department it is that's engaging with that customer that I think are most powerful. And yes, there are some things we can do across the entire organization too.
Interesting. All right, here's one actually I'm pretty interested in as well. I'm really interested in hyper-personalization, as you described it. What are good resources to identify systems and processes and tools to really get those kinds of initiatives started and integrated into your systems? I'll let you take that one, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost is like you got to define what hyper-personalization means for your customer base, right? Like I think different companies and different directions and different levels of service and different products and services require different things. And I think once you kind of understand, and it starts with your customer, right? Like ask them, if we were going to provide a hyper-personalized experience for you, like what does that mean for you? Is it us suggesting products? Is it us calling you directly? Is it us leaving you alone? Like, you know, it's hard to say unless you ask your customers directly and you start to build that journey around what your customer expectations are. And then I would take it back, and you know, we have a fantastic service here called Audience Panel Services, and you know, leveraging panels and reaching out to other people out in the universe who, you know, may have answers to these questions too, and seeing how that balances with your customer base and changing how potential customers see your business versus existing customers and changing those patterns and behaviors over time. It's an iterative process. But again, like I said, it starts with what your customers want and need from you, and starting to build the technologies and the processes and the interaction models around your customers and what they're looking for is probably the best place to start.
That's a great one. Here's another good question. How do customer experience strategies change in service industries where the customer base is obligated to work with you? I'm specifically thinking of government sectors where customers have no other options like the DMV. I'll let you take this one, David.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll tell you, Ryan and I both started our careers at Accenture, which might account for the blue shirts and the dark sweater and coat. We just showed up looking like this. But I left Accenture to actually join the mayor of Denver to help him run the city of Denver. And I did that for 2 years. I'd come out of the CRM practice at Accenture, and the mayor of Denver really wanted to take a much more customer-driven approach to how government worked. In many, many cases, governments or nonprofits are very mission-driven, and there's ways to use feedback systems to help meet that mission. You know, for example, one of our customers runs a housing program in a big city in the US and wants to make sure that people in that city get access to the housing help that they need. And so they're using our product to help customers find their way to the right program. It's often incredibly difficult to know which housing program might be available to you based on your circumstance, whether it's your earnings or your family or whatever it may be. And they're using our product to help get that customer or that resident in that example to the right housing program and get them the support that they need. So mission driven is super important, and tools like ours really help people connect to the mission. The other thing, you know, people may think from their experience with the DMV that maybe governments, whether it's city or state or federal, don't care about the customer experience. They actually really do, because in many, many cases, they're under-resourced. Cities and states right now are incredibly under-resourced. And if I have to go back to the DMV multiple times because it didn't work out the first time, they're totally strained in their ability to support me and support the community that they're responsible for supporting. So customer experience bleeds over into efficiency and effectiveness. It bleeds over into mission and mission realization, all things that people in government really do care about.
Very interesting. That was a great question. We have another one. Much of what we do in our organization is driven by laws and policies. Do you see this as a heavy lift when we start to capture customer journey information?
Yeah, and maybe that question has something to do with data privacy and what you do with data. If that's right, then we can sort of point to it in that direction. It seems like that's what the question's driven toward. So Ryan, jump in as well, but usually there's always a way to be able to capture information and to use it with the customer's consent to help make that experience better. A lot of things today, whether it's CCPA in California or GDPR, which originated out of Europe, a lot of it has to do with consent. And there's ways to make it clear that you're going to do something with the information and improve the interaction that that customer has with you as a result. If I thought that sharing information would help make my life easier or the service better, I would do it. So in those instances, it's incredibly important to do what Ryan talked about, which is closing the loop and showing them that them consenting to share information with you resulted in some sort of positive outcome for them.
And I think the thing too is if you're in a heavily regulated industry or you're dealing with GDPR or data privacy related to medical records, for example, having a good understanding of what those laws and policies are before you start to initiate your customer feedback programs is key. And really having a good understanding of that. Because again, if you're asking for consent, knowing why you're asking for consent and be able to communicate why that consent's required, makes your customers feel like you have a handle on what you're doing.
Yep.
And it makes them trust that the data that you're providing is being used at your best interest, maybe not necessarily the company's best interest, but the customer or resident or consumer or whoever you're asking for. So I think getting a good understanding of what that looks like and that landscape looks like before you initiate a customer feedback program allows you to build a successful program, build the system to make it happen, and then be able to communicate to your customer base what you're doing with their data and why.
Yeah, we support a lot of school districts, and FERPA is a big regulation there. FERPA basically means you got to ask the parent before you ask the kid. And if I'm a parent, which I am, and somebody wants to survey my son and ask him information, I want to know why before I give my consent. And if it's to do things to help his education or to find the right courses or to gauge his interest in extracurricular activity, I'm going to agree to that, especially if I then get to see the results of his survey. So you got to start with the design thinking and what is the system, the engagement system you're going to build to support that customer.
Very, very interesting. Great question. We have time for about one more question if somebody wants to submit one. All right, here's one that I would like to ask. One of the things I think that oftentimes happens with automation is based on the company culture and different people's perspectives. You have some people who are kind of afraid of automation. You have others who really engage it and are like, oh, this is awesome, this is cool, I can't wait to learn this. You have others who think, this is going to take my job away. How, as leaders in a company, do you identify those things and address those and make sure that the culture of the organization is on board with where you're moving?
So again, in my career, I've spent the majority of my life building global ERP systems that you can shared service and COE with automation all over the place. And so I've interacted with those questions for a long time now. I think the thing about people who understand automation see the picture, right? Like you get how you can wire feedback into systems, and you get why it's valuable to put customer feedback from Alchemer into your CRM and how people can go use it. Change is change, and the best way to overcome fear of change and what's going on is to articulate the value of what it is, what's in it for the individual at the end of the line. Again, back to David's point about collecting customer feedback. If you explain to them why you're collecting feedback and what's in it for them and the benefit that they're going to get out of it, they're going to be much more inclined to seek to understand, to accept the change, and then help participate in those interactions. The job loss thing. I think when you think about automation, you have to think about how it empowers your people. And how does it empower people to do a better job, have better control, engage with your customers in a different way, provide better results? Like, it should be, if the intent of the automation or the intent of your program is positive in the way that you're driving the value that you add as an organization, again, it comes to how you communicate and how you articulate what's in it for the individual at the end of the line. And that's always the best place to start.
All right, we're inching towards the end, but we've gotten just one more really good question in. What are the best ways to improve a customer's experience when the interaction with the customer has not been a positive one, like having to suspend services or fines or penalties levied on a customer?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll tell you from years and years spending time in this industry, there's a lot of studies that say customers' loyalty goes up faster if you handle a negative situation well than if you never had that negative situation in the first place. It's sort of amazing that if everything's smooth sailing, there's not as much loyalty to an organization as when something goes wrong and you handle it incredibly well. So I think the way I'd answer this is, I think transparency and communication and engagement, showing that you're willing to close the loop, showing that you can be an empathetic enterprise, and you do that by listening, can take what seemed like an initial negative or potentially ongoing negative situation and building engagement and trust through that interaction. So I actually think these kind of situations are some of the best possible situations for building lifelong customers.
Very interesting. All right. Well, thank you, David, and thank you, Ryan. This has been a fascinating conversation. I'm going to put the last slide up just again. If you have any questions, let us know and we will answer them after the webinar. And if you have any, if you're curious about Alchemer, visit www.alchemer.com. And again, thanks to everyone today for your time.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.